also glad to be here because I've dedicated my career to working with adolescents. The whole first part of my career I spent in the public sector, working with community service agencies. And so on top of doing sexual addiction work, I'm a clinically certified sex offender therapist and have spent years helping families repair from those tragic events that occur within a family. And I've done thousands of hours of group therapy with adolescents, hundreds or thousands of hours of family therapy. And when it comes to doing pornography work, because of course the numbers of adolescents with sexual addiction is growing, we tend to mimic what we do with adults in adolescence. For example, it's very popular to put kids in a 12-step group. And I love 12-step group. I require my adult clients to do that. And even adolescent clients. But you have to know that the kind of things you hear in a 12-step group are often implicitly about the cautionary tale. Adults saying, I did this or I did that and I've destroyed my life again. And adolescents tend to hear something different than cautionary tale. They think, oh, that sounds very exciting. I've never done that. Even with your younger 20 addicts, if you send them to a group that's not very homogeneous, they have this experience. They trigger it all the time because they're hearing new things. They tend not to hear cautionary tale. So I have been spending a great deal of time working with parents. And I've evolved to the point where most often an adolescent that's addicted to pornography will come in, and I will almost do every session with the parents in the room. And my goal is get the parents trained to the point where they don't need me. This is really the goal. For example, there's both 12 Steps and other programs that work with adolescents. They will do this. They think, well, we're going to include the parents. So they have this track for the kids, and they meet once together, and they have this track for the parents, and maybe they meet once. But we keep enforcing this idea that we don't talk about sex with each other. We do that with the therapist, or we do that with somebody else. And so I think all of you would understand and recognize that when you're dealing with addiction, especially with an adolescent, daily conversation has to happen. So parents have to understand this. And so in the process of working with parents and understanding those deficits, it's become clear and clear to me that much like we work with adult addicts and their spouses to realign their emotions and intentions with each other, we have to do the same with parents because we have to respect their sacred role as the teachers of sexuality, even though they may not have done it. Right? We have to respect that sacred role. We have to help them repair a relationship and get to a place where they can do that. And I think the research outside of addiction work suggests this. It's very clear that when there's parental involvement, things go better with kids. We get better outcomes, right? The kids make better progress. So there's a few objectives that we're going to look at. And these are what these are the objectives. My goal is that you understand the nature and power of pornography and its impact on your child's brain. Now, I should have prefaced this. I want you to imagine that you're the parent, that I'm training you. And I'm not doing a PowerPoint, I'm in a session with you and your child. And my goal is to teach you certain principles. And I'm identifying as a therapist what the weaknesses are, where are the gaps. Is there a relationship difficulty? Is there just sexual naivety? Is there trauma going on in the family? Our goal is to assess, to repair, so that parents can resume their sacred role. So to do that, the parents have to understand the nature and power of pornography and its impact on the child's brain. They have to understand and teach sexuality from an urge positive, that's my term, urge positive or sex positive perspective. How to protect our homes from a cultural hyper-focus on digital sexuality and the necessity of the development of a trusting, open relationship with our children as a primary preventative measure.
When you say a sex-positive culture, can you talk us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, and I'm going to refer to one of the most popular avenues of this right now, Fight the New Drug. If you been to their website. I think everybody here has probably seen their website. They talk about this a great deal. Sex positive does not mean pro-porn. If you say that out in the real world, that's what somebody might think. But I will talk extensively about what I mean by urge positive. So imagine again that I'm wanting to demonstrate to you what kinds of things I say and how I demonstrate and teach parents about how to help their kids with pornography addiction. And there's some basics. Now, what I'm going to do today is not comprehensive. What I'm going to do in an hour and a half is hit on these really serious topics that I think parents just don't know or understand. And if they're cognizant and they're aware and they love their kids with this information, they do really well. They do really well. But I want to start with this quote. Elder Packer. And I want you to know, I've been doing this presentation, this particular one, for over 10 years. And I have always used this quote. And it is an old quote, and I love it. But there's a rest of the story to this quote. Elder Packer says, it was necessary that this power, he's talking about the power of procreation, have at least two dimensions. One, it must be strong. And two, it must be more or less constant. This power must be strong, except for the compelling persuasion of these feelings, men would be reluctant to accept the responsibility of sustaining a home and a family. This power must be constant, too, for it becomes a binding tie in the family. Now, this is an amazing quote. He goes on to talk about other species on the planet that don't have strong and constant sex drives. What else is there besides strong and constant? What? Say louder. Talk. Sporadic? What species have sporadic sex drives? I want a specific example. Cows? Sporadic sex drive? Okay. Good. I'm not aware of the cow sex drive. The bulls. Okay, very good. Elk, for example, or species that have a rut. How often are they sexual? Once a year, right? He says these species that do not have strong and constant sex drives do not live in family units. Interesting, right? So if you look at this quote from a sex-negative perspective, he's really chastising men. Men, if it wasn't for sex, you wouldn't live in a family unit. I really do think he's talking about mankind. And trying to help us understand the necessity of the power of procreation and the sexual urge and the drive that we have and the function and role that it plays in our life. He really wants us to understand that. So listen, I've been quoting this for so long, firesides, I do a lot of speaking, and people will see me, they're like, oh, strong and constant, strong and constant. I'm like, yeah, that's right. I own the website, strongconstant.com. Hasn't been developed yet, but I own it, planning on doing that. But it's such an old quote. Elder Packer, in his last talk before he died, said it again. If you go back and watch. We were in our living room. I jump up, hey, he said it. My kids, my wife are like, said what? He said strong or constant. He said it again. And then he waxes poetic about the beauty of the relationship and its necessity. And of course, he gets personal and talks about his own relationship. And it's really, really a wonderful thing. So this idea that the sex drive is strong and constant is really critical for parents to understand because they're so shy and tentative to talk about it. You want to scare them about, like, look, this is happening. Your kids have it. If you don't talk about it, something's going to happen. And I'm going to demonstrate with this. I try to teach them and help them understand this shepherding principle. This is a scripture, Zechariah 10:2, and I'm going to take complete license. I've not heard this interpretation. It's totally mine. And I'm welcome to be corrected by any bishop or stake president, but I use it to my own end. Zechariah 10:2, I believe, is a prophecy of pornography, used in the words with somebody who doesn't understand our modern times. For the idols have spoken vanity, because they build all kinds of idols. Some idols weren't beautiful. They were to some god of war or who knows what. But this idol is about, look at me, vanity. spoke in vanity. And the diviners, the makers of the idol, have seen the lie. They know the lie that they tell, and have told false dreams. And if you work with addiction, you know the power of fantasy and what it does in the human mind. And they comfort in vain. If that doesn't describe compulsive sexual experience, comfort in vain. Therefore, they went their way as a flock, and they were troubled because there was no shepherd. And I'm going to suggest to you, we have just come out of a generation that did not talk about sexuality. And Stake President corrected me. I used to say, how many of you had the sex talk with your parents? He'd say, ask the question, but ask them not to respond. So think for yourself. If that happened for you, I know it didn't happen for me, not whatsoever, and it was generational. It wasn't because my parents were bad, but it was just not talked about. So this shepherding principle means that specifically in sexuality, we have to watch, guard, and guide. And this is a threefold effort, right? They really have to be mindful. Yes?
I was going to say that sex talk, I remember when I was a youth, I got that talk, but it was so awkward that I went to my friends to clarify.
Right, because the kids feel awkward. Your parents are terrified. Their hearts are beating. Somebody's telling them maybe they've got to do this or thinking they should. Now, some parents do it great. They really do. And so not everybody falls in this boat, but it's absolutely true of people that are highly religious. Not just Mormon, Baptists, Catholics. They tend not to talk about sexuality. And so it's hard, and we do sometimes have to clarify with a friend, unfortunately. And if we don't get it, we don't clarify with a friend, we learn it from our friends, right? So I'm trying to convince the parents, you are the shepherd. I don't look at the parent and I say to the kid, your parents know everything about sex. And I can feel them starting to squirm. And I'm like, they really do. You can ask them any question. And I'm knowing that I'm going to come back to them and try to help them decide how to answer those questions. But it is critical. Now, I was going to delete this slide, but I'm going to use it. There's a really bad picture of a very famous barbershop in Mesa, Arizona. It's called Joe's Barbershop. Joe still cuts there. He's got to be 95 at least. And that's where I've been going to get my haircut since I was 11 years old. And I still go to Joe's. And I live way out in Queen Creek now. And I drive into town, my office is in town, and I'll go down to Joe's on University because it just feels like a barbershop. You don't get that feeling anymore, you know. But why do I do that? Why am I showing you this? I'm showing you this because we want parents to know that habits that start in our adolescence are more likely to stick around later, especially sexual habits. Now, if I move further, I probably won't go to Joe's that often or ever, and that habit will go away. But sexual habits that hit in our youth really stick. Now, for example, we all were curious at one time. I remember when I was about 11, I was curious about sex. And where did I go? I didn't go to Google because we didn't have Google. I went to the Encyclopedia Britannica. I think this is the World Book, but that was the good image I found. And you know what I found? You know what I found in Encyclopedia Britannica? You remember? Cellophane overlays in the anatomy section. Oh yeah, it was thrilling. I was so excited. And I read, and I got a bit of an education, and I could feel arousal. And when I put it back, I made sure that the spacing was the exact same so nobody would know, right? That's where I had been or what I had been doing. This changes, though, right? My son had a very different experience. I remember he came to me one time and he says, hey, Dad, I got to talk to you. I'm like, okay, what's up? No, in the office. I'm like, oh, in the office. And I'm his bishop at the time, and I'm, thinking, oh, this is going to be good. This will be some sexual something. I've been waiting for this, because I know it all. I'm thinking. And we go in and we sit down, and he says, hey, Dad, you know how Mom changes the channel every time something sexy comes on? And I'm like, yeah, I know. And I thought, he used the word sexy appropriately at 11. I'm thinking, oh, he's been thinking about this for a while. And he said, yeah. I said, yeah. He said, well, the other day I was watching TV alone, and something sexy came on. And I picked up the remote to change it, and I didn't change it. I watched it, and I liked it. He said, I think I'm addicted to calligraphy. Right. And I'm thinking, calligraphy? You know, I just had this image of him writing and not being able to stop. But of course, that only took me about 3 seconds, right? And I said, you mean pornography? Yeah, pornography. And what a beautiful moment. Now, why do you think he came to me at 11? Because we had a talk at 8, right? I told him this was going to happen. But he, even with my preparation, right, still full of shame about it. And it was a wonderful corrective moment where we talk about what natural sexuality is and that his body is doing what it's supposed to and that it's supposed to feel good. I tell you, I have never heard a bigger, heavier sigh than I did that day. So he said, it's okay that I felt that way? I said, yeah, buddy, I feel that way. I said, it might be good to turn the TV. Why don't you tell mom sometimes, hey, mom, is that kind of sexy? Yeah. Make sure mom knows you're feeling that way. Let's keep talking about it. Keep coming to me. We want to protect you better. We want to make sure there's not bad stuff on TV because you're getting ready. Heavenly Father's doing his job with you. He's getting ready to make you a husband and a father, and those feelings have to start now. You see, and a lot of parents won't think their 11-year-old can feel sexual. And why? Well, because he probably weighs 90 pounds at 11. He seems prepubescent to you, correct? But in order for all those physical changes to make, that testosterone has to hit and hit hard to get those things to change, and it takes time. But as soon as that hits, he's viable. He doesn't know, but he is, right? So don't think that he has to have broad shoulders and smelly to have sexual feelings. So this is a good example. My son, he talked about seeing images other places in that conversation, and I had to make some big changes. I wasn't protecting him as well as I thought I was. So we had to do that. But it's an example of what Pat Carnes says is the tsunami. He says there's a tsunami coming, and we are 100 years from understanding that we are dealing with regarding the influence and impact of cyber sex on mankind. Now, I've talked to Pat about this quote. He does not mean porn the tsunami. That's already here. He's talking about its effect on sexuality in our culture, on what it's ultimately going to mean. And 100 years from now, if it's still around, we're really going to see what it's doing. This tsunami takes lots of forms, and why is it so powerful? Why does he use the term tsunami? Well, here's why. Let me run through this with you. This is a measurement of technology and its ability to reach 50 million people. So look, the telephone took 75 years to reach 50 million people. The radio took 38 years. TV took 13 years to reach 50 million people. The internet took 4 years to reach 50 million people. Facebook took 3.5. iPods took 3 years. AOL took 2.5. And that one is Draw Something. How many of you played the game Draw Something? Never played that game? It's a great little app. Yeah, it's fun. I used to play it with my kids a couple years ago. You play Hangman, essentially, or no, what's the game? Yeah, Pictionary. It's like Pictionary, but you draw a picture and you send it, and then they open their app and they try to guess and they send it back. It's kind of fun. 50 days to reach 50 million people. Angry Birds. How many of you played Angry Birds? Yeah. Oh, yeah. 35 days to reach 50 million people. So this is the tsunami. The digital world has opened up to us. And what have we done with it? We kicked the door open and said, come on in, right? Because we get open internet, I'll bet most of you have at least 3 devices besides your computer in your home. Big families have 5 to 7 devices. You know, we used to get this old advice. Make sure you put your computer in a common area. Okay, and they do it, right? And then they buy their son an iPod. That's an iPod Touch that he can take anywhere with him, right? And when that first came out, parents didn't recognize what was happening. But this technological tsunami has happened at every level of our culture and with every addiction. Almost every addiction has its root in technology advancement. For example, old alcohol was 6 to 7% alcohol. And today, 100 proof, manufacturing has gotten so good, so what's 100 proof? It's 50% alcohol, right? We're Mormons, we don't know those, right? That's true, thank you. Thank you for qualifying that you only know that in your previous life. Very good. And things like tobacco, very labor intensive to produce. And so addiction rates were very low in the beginning. And now, behind every gas station counter and in every grocery store, manufacturing capabilities, distribution capabilities, and addiction rates climb and climb and climb and climb and climb, specifically because of technology advancement. Even our food, right? Some basic element of wheat, flour, and sugar, very labor intensive, all to do what? Get something that looked like this, right? And life was very different. Today, what does that look like? Looks like this. Very, very different. Because of technology, because of food manufacturers' ability to create dense, very falsely dense caloric foods. And I did not pose for that picture. I would not do that to you. Although, pretty good likeness. So you see, this constitutes an overseas. This is like food porn. Like you get on the internet, and that's what it feels like with porn, right? Our culture used to be, if you wanted something less than 100 years ago, definitely 200 years ago, you would have to make it. You would find the resource, find the tools, tons of effort, right? Technology advancement. We call it civilization, right? What would we do without the mall or the grocery store? And now, guess what? We don't even have to go anywhere. You just order it. You know what? I captured this picture. I didn't realize that was my thing suggested for you, Dan, based on what you bought. And I thought, oh, I should probably take that off. But I looked. And I thought, oh, there's nothing I'm embarrassed about. So what specifically does this look like in pornography? What are the attributes that technology has provided, and why is it so addictive? Can we identify that? And I'm going to tell you we can, and we want parents to understand, because when we say, fight the nude truck, I love those guys. The message they've got. People think this is a metaphor. I'll tell parents it's like cocaine. They're like, oh, it's like cocaine. Yeah. They think I'm being metaphoric. I'm not being metaphoric. I'm saying if your 11-year-old boy sees this, his ability to not go back to that is extremely limited. And here's why. There's 2 reasons why. The tsunami looks like this. It's a tsunami of novelty and supernormal stimulant. I want you to understand these 2 psychological, neurological constructs because I want parents to understand them. Hemmer Duzel of an institute in Germany, the Cognitive Neuroscience Institute there, he talks very specifically in his research about the power of novelty. When we are seeing something new, we see it has a potential for rewarding us in some way. This potential that lies in new things motivates us to explore our environment for rewards. The brain learns that the stimulus, once familiar, has no reward associated with it, and so it loses its potential. For this reason, only completely new objects activate the midbrain area and increase our levels of dopamine. Novelty. And educational professors will tell you this is how we learn, by discriminating. We have we show a child red, and we want her to also learn blue, well, we have to have multiple colors for her to discriminate the difference. So novelty, our brain is constantly seeking it out. And that's our nature, correct? And so this novelty issue, as opposed to what? Novelty in pornography, and the researchers talk about, well, families think, especially Mormon families, that nudity is the problem with pornography. And I'm going to suggest you nudity is not the problem. How do we know that? Because there's been research done. They measure arousal. Take one single nude picture, and they measure the arousal, and here's what happens. It goes up, and then it goes down within 45 seconds to a minute. One image. Because the newness wears off. Definitely it comes up. There's something there. My brain is recognizing it as attractive and interesting, right? But in pornography, the issue is not nudity, it is novelty. So when the arousal starts to go down, we click for new image. Even if the image is very similar to the last, the new image reinitiates that midbrain area and we get a new spike, a new dopamine spike. And then in 45 seconds, and if you question your adult addicts closely, those who look at porn will describe to you this feverish moving from image to image, maintaining of a level of dopamine and adrenaline that hovers in the brain. So remember, novelty is the problem. Not that nudity doesn't initiate the experience, but novelty is what affects the brain so severely. The other neurological principle is supernormal stimulant. This was discovered by a biologist, a Dutch biologist named Nico Tinbergen in 1973. You know, he won a Nobel Prize. It's about a major body of Tinbergen's research focused on what he termed supernormal stimuli. This was the concept that he could build an artificial object which could elicit a stronger response, not just the response, a stronger response for an instinct that the object was genetically intended. My favorite, he took a large number of butterflies of one species and he put them in a room, and he just drew on a piece of paper or cardboard the exact pattern of the female. He drew it, but he made it twice as big and twice as bright as any female actually was. And he put it in the room. And what happened? Louder. What happened? The males had a heart attack. They went right to it, right? And they smothered it. In fact, none of the other males, it was only until they all covered it that the other males didn't notice it. And so what's happening in that moment? Are these butterflies sinners? No. They're being manipulated, correct? Because the diviner knows the genetic structure. He understands it. What are they attracted to? Oh, it's this. Let me exaggerate it, and thereby I will trap the organism. Right? That means this little girl's going to be very confused, or the male's going to be very frustrated. Imagine if we could interview the butterfly. Hello, Mr. Butterfly, how are you doing today? Well, I'm not very satisfied. Well, why not? Well, I'm not mating successfully, but I seem to be stuck on this female. She appears to be better than the others because she's unreal. None of the others can look like her. So fabricated, exaggerated stimulus will produce an exaggerated neurologic response. And this, if you read Hilton's work or others, the 4 neurologic brain changes that happen in addiction. Number 1, excessive dopamine production. More than natural, more than normal. You can't find it in the natural world, only in this exaggerated stimulus situation. And so if you look at pornography and the diviners, the people who make it, they know this. They study psychology. They know we have to have rapid succession. That video doesn't load fast enough. We will lose them. It's too long. Make it short so they will want another one. Right? Novelty. And the people they hire, exaggerated body parts. Correct? And they're doing exaggerated sex acts. They do the kinds of things that we don't do in healthy sexuality for the most part, right? And those two exaggerated principles do exactly what Tim Bergen did to the butterflies. Exactly. To human beings, male and female. The idea, the notion, this is not an issue for women is false. It is not true. It is true. It is not true that women are not visually stimulated. It is not true. They are visually stimulated. To a lesser degree than men, but they are visually stimulated. And those numbers of porn-addicted females are rising. So what does this all constitute? I've talked about all different areas of addiction, including pornography. Technology's role. Technology's role is to overstimulate. This is the only thing that will ignite any addiction, is excessive dopamine production. It is the first neurologic change in the brain. Excessive dopamine production. And what is it doing? Deutsch talks about, in his book, The Brain That Changes Itself, it is separating two vital and critical emotional experiences in the brain, neurologic experiences, separating intensity versus satisfaction. Now, you can see how these two might be or might seem very closely related, and they are, but compulsive behaviors of all kinds separate these two. For example, I'll give you some natural examples. Pancakes and syrup. Syrup is a manufactured sweetened, it's natural, but it's heavy sweet. It's really strong. And what happens when you try to drink orange juice after you've had, right, exactly, it's sour. You're like, ugh. Well, that's because your taste buds is so saturated, so overstimulated with sweetness that you can't taste the simple sweetness that's in the orange juice. So all you taste is the bitter. This is a metaphor, but it works perfectly with pornography and sexual stimulation. If I look at pornography for hours and I come to look at a real person, a real human, I am not going to notice the simple, common things that make them beautiful or wonderful. Anybody know who this is? I love doing this with boys, with adolescent boys. Who is it? Hey, it's Halo. Anybody know his name? Master Chief. I knew there would be a man that knew his name. That is Master Chief, and he is probably the most popular video game figure because he's in every series. Most video games, they have new figures, and this one does too, but Master Chief stays central role. And boys everywhere, when I do this to award your stakes, I ask, boys, raise your hand, who knows who this is? The whole group, they all know who Master Chief is. Well, imagine you're a mom, and you say, hey, why don't you turn off that video game and play checkers? Right? Because what's he going to say? Besides, what's checkers? You might say that. He'd be like, checkers? That's boring, right? Because he's so overstimulated that he can't recognize the simple fun of that kind of game. It's too low stimulating. So I want to keep making these comparisons for families so they really get and understand the power. Yes?
My wife's a school teacher, and it's funny, during the summer, she's kind of required our children to read, but to go from YouTube or TV to want to go read, that's exactly...
Oh, it's the exact response. Look, I feel it myself, just from being in a digital world and working, making PowerPoints. I'm on a computer all the time. I have a phone, and my family is big, and we're Facebooking, and pictures of the temple out the window, and everybody's commenting. And if I stop and pick a book up or a research article, my brain is going, you didn't even downshift yet. What are you doing? I'd rather poke needles in my eye sometimes.
I remember I was reading an article where they were saying back in I can't remember, like 1920s and 1930s, parents would try to limit the amount of books that children would read that they saw as like fluff books.
Yeah.
They want to read more. You know, they want to read the
Something more substantial, yeah.
Yes. So they were reading like Grimm's fairy tales. They're like, oh, I only want you to read 10 minutes of that.
Yes.
Because I want you to read more intelligent stuff. And now we're trying to just get our kids to read anything.
Anything, right? Harry Potter. I like Harry Potter. My wife and kids, fanatics. They're like, we're going to go to London, right? And go to the amusement park. And I'm like, no. I'll stay. I'll watch the dogs. And she used to sit in the hallway and read to the kids. They'd go to bed, and she'd sit in the hallway, and they'd all be in their bed. And then as they got older, they would read the next book themselves. Yeah, it's great. Reading's fantastic. But the point I'm making is the overstimulation that technology provides away from the normal. Okay? And for some reason, this one always keeps coming back to me. I'm not sure why. Super normal stimulant. Scott and I had lunch upstairs yesterday, and we were talking about dieting and how successful he had been and how unsuccessful I had been. So I thought I needed another slide to remind me. Okay, so this is Jimmy. Jimmy comes to all of my presentations with me, and I want to use him a little bit to talk about what's happening neurologically and emotionally for our kids. Now, this could be a female. I'm not being sexist. I've already clarified it's a female issue too. You know where young Mormon girls are finding pornography unintentionally? They go babysit at someone's home that is unprotected. They have cable or open internet, and they're unsupervised, right? Sweet 14-year-old girl taking care of those kids, put them to bed at 8 o'clock. What does she have for 3 hours, right? She's alone. This is where girls are finding it, and girls are less likely to talk about it because that's a guy issue, right? You think men have shame about this? Oh man, it's painful. So do 11-year-olds think about sex? Well, of course, in this group, yes. When I do this in a church setting, the women are going, I don't think so, you know. And I'm watching the men going, oh yeah, well, of course, yeah, right? But my kid at 11, you know, I know that he did, but what he spent most of his time thinking about was his bionicles or his bike, right? And sex, even in that moment, intense curiosity, but absolutely it turns it on, it comes on. So 11-year-olds, maybe even 10. And if you work in the field, you've heard stories about 8 and 7 and 6, right? Where that artificially gets turned on, some kind of early exposure. But definitely they think sexually and are likely to come across some form of pornography. What's going to happen? Let's assume this happens alone. He stumbles on it on the internet. He's somewhere where there's not a lot of people around. This happens. What's going to happen neurologically at first? Well, the first thing that's going to happen is his brain is going to get super curious. And I've heard these stories about, I didn't know what I was looking at first. It took me a few seconds to realize. Why? Because they had never seen nude people, right? They're not quite sure. But then the limbic system is going to decide, is this pleasure or pain? And what is it going to decide? Why? He's not seen this before. It's what? It's a novelty because it's novel. Why else? Because we're pre-wired. Elder Packer says, what? What 2 factors? It is strong and constant. So we're pre-wired for it, right? So it is going to come on because the brain knows that that's what life is about.
We've actually seen a lot. How many TV shows can you watch without seeing someone?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a TV show, you know, it's so encapsulated at time, the fall in love piece of the story means they had sex. They meet, you see an image of them in bed together, and now now it's something. Sex is what creates relationship, right? So let's get back to Jimmy. So the limbic system is absolutely going to tell him this is pleasurable, and then his brain is going to flood with the chemicals, dopamine, norepinephrine, oxytocin, right? And is it going to be the most pleasurable thing he has ever felt in his life? It will. We know that, right? It is the least expensive high you can get legally. We know it's going to be profoundly pleasurable, even to the point of confusion, like, whoa, what is that? Tingly on their skin, they'll say. Sick to my stomach, they'll say. Right? And what happens to rewarded behavior? It's likely to what? Repeat. And if they go back, and after that experiences, they're going to notice their brain coming back to normal. And now, what do they experience as normal? What's their interpretation of normal? Yeah, loss of satisfaction. What once was boring is now painful. Because when they say I'm bored, what they mean is, if I do that, my brain will hurt in some way. Because you see the grimace on their face, but they just say the word boring, and we're like, oh, that's ridiculous. I'm going to show you boring, or we're going to parent them in some way, right? But then here's what happens. He thinks to himself, in a contemplative moment after this, he thinks, well, that felt great. But that was bad. Now, especially if he was a Mormon kid, right? Or a Baptist kid, or who knows. But he's going to, and then he's going to think, well, I liked bad. And what's next? Right. Especially if this becomes chronic, if he's able to repeat, he's unprotected by his parents, it's artificially available to him in some way. That's the beginning of the. I don't know that I meant to say it that way, but let's say his older brother's best friend gives him his phone and says, hey, look at this. Or the parents have not protected him. Open internet in the house, right? And that's when that toxic shame hits, where they begin this process of not being able to tell the difference, at least at the beginning sexually, about that feeling, about I'm bad. And this is the beginning of those core beliefs that we all talk about in the sexual self that addicts have. We know the 4 core beliefs. Who knows those? Let's shout those out. I am bad, number 1. I must hide. I have to hide who I really am. I can't trust others. This one is always confusing to my clients. How does this make me not trust others? I tell them, well, because you spent those years hiding, and then because of your hiding, you didn't get your emotional needs met. And now as you grow, you don't know that this happened because you're kind of a fish in water at that stage. You think it's because some other people aren't doing it for you. They're not coming to you, but it's really you're externalizing all of that hiding that you've done, the walls you build up around the shame, and now it makes it so you can't trust others because you think that they're not going to be able to meet your needs. And you project that even further because if I tell them, they're going to reject me. They're going to hurt me or yell at me or be mad at me or reject me. And so it evolves into that full-blown element of addiction where it seems impossible to live without my addiction. So this may not happen right at 11, but it certainly can. Pat Carnes, I saw Pat Carnes speak in 1989 in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And he said then that all sexual addiction has its roots in trauma. And he really believed that then. He says today that I was wrong because I didn't understand pornography the way we do now and its availability now. He said now a man with no trauma or a woman with no trauma, no negative history, 3 months of active porn use, full-blown addict, willing to give up his wife, give up his job, give up his family. 3 months will make him as addicted as all the other. Now, if you add excessive porn viewing and trauma, well, then what do you got? We have a super addict. I'm suggesting this is what we're experiencing today around sex addiction is super addicts because they have both. They have this intense neurologic shift that has never happened. Rates in porn addiction when it was just print media, not even close to what it is today. So that's that anatomy. And remember, if we're going to educate our parents, they have to believe that sex drive is strong and constant in their children. They have to get at least scared of it and then comfortable about it, and then they've got to be able to work with it. They've got to be able to talk to their kids. So here are 5 steps that I have developed just in my own treatment planning with parents about how to shepherd their child's sexuality. Number one, have to build a relationship of trust above all else. This means we have to know they will come to us. If his chains come off his bike, is he going to come ask you to help him? Well, let me tell you, Dad, if he thinks I'm not going to ask Dad, because Dad won't put the remote down or Dad will get mad at me, he's certainly not going to come talk to you about sexuality. That is not going to happen. And then you'll have a problem. So we have to develop a relationship above all else. And parents need training in this. We think all parents know how to do this. They don't. How were they raised? What is it like in their home, having those conversations? When I have a boy that doesn't progress in treatment, I start looking at the relationship with the parents. There's something going on there that doesn't let the behavioral stuff work or the insight work or his reaching out isn't happening because there's something going on in the relationship. So we have to build a relationship of trust above all else. 2, we have to aggressively protect our home from inappropriate media. Now, here's what I get sometimes. Well, we're not going to filter because I believe he's got to learn to manage that now because I'm not going to be able to do it for him when he's 20. And I say, well, okay, Dad, well then why don't you give your boy your car keys now? Because you're not going to be able to drive with him when he's 20, and you don't want to wait till he's 16. You don't want to use rules and regulations. You don't want to wait. So this is surprisingly difficult for me. Parents are reluctant to really do good protection, to make sure their kids cannot get to pornography in their home. Most of the time, it's because they feel overwhelmed. They don't know how to do it. They think it's not possible. They'll hear other people tell them, well, you can't really. You can't turn that off. You can't change that. You can't filter that. And so parents get these really negative, bad messages, and they end up doing nothing. They work with their kid, and I'll say, have we taken care of the filtering? Well, we haven't done that yet. And I tell people all the time that 80% of my clients under 35 years old started their porn addiction by porn provided by their parents. Unintentionally sometimes, most of the time, right? Parents got open internet, they did nothing to filter it, they even bought their kids devices, and then they scratch their heads. Like, why are we having to, what's wrong with him? And they get mad, and well, what's wrong with my boy? Right? They didn't protect him. They weren't a shepherd. Not only did they not protect him, they didn't talk about sex. Right? And if we know, the feeling is strong and constant. So we go through that. Number 3, teach them early and consistently progressive developmental facts. They have to talk about sex. They've got to teach their kids. And we go through this series of when do you talk to them? How do you start? What do those conversations look like? Trying to help them get comfortable with that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that further in the presentation, but I really want you to know it's not about what curriculum you use. Go find it. There's tons of books about it. One of my favorites is the Ayers, Linda and Ayers, yes. They have a great book talking to your kids about sex. There are several others. Just go find a source, find a book, use it to help you build your confidence. Okay, I can do this. I can do it. And then go talk to your kid and talk about those things. And we'll talk about some timing things. Number 4, model and demonstrate strong and abiding affection and respect. They have to see it to understand it. They don't have to see sex. They don't have to see sex. They've got to see you hugging and kissing in the kitchen. And number 5, be prepared to respond to the first sexual experience. Know it's coming. Don't do the secret hope. Oh, I hope my kid never struggles with this. Well, they're not going to struggle, but they're going to have sexual feelings. They're going to have sexual experiences. So we want to be prepared. We have to be as strong and constant as the urge itself. That's what we have to do as parents. Okay, so building a relationship of trust has some really interesting components that I found extremely helpful for parents. And for me, this is like, once you just identify the building blocks of healthy relationship between a kid and, because parents kind of implicitly have that. But once you identify it, they're like, oh yeah, I think that, yeah, I agree, that's important. Because they have experiences with their kids that tell them that it's important. And so here are the 2 things I cover with them. I tell them there's 2 types of bonding principles. There's implicit behavioral principles and explicit emotional principles. And I want to give you a little theoretical background This is Alan Shore. How many of you are aware of Alan Shore's work? If you're not, you should be. I just want you to know. He is one of the foremost researchers in neuroscience today. Here's what he says. It is now established. What does that mean when a researcher says it is now established? It means there's so many studies, comprehensively. It's now established that emotions are the highest order of direct expression of bioregulation in complex organisms. That's us, complex organisms. That the maturation of the neural mechanisms involved in self-regulation is experience-dependent, and that these critical affective experiences are embedded in the attachment relationship. What he just said was, if you want your kids to emotionally regulate, they have to be very well connected to you. That's what he said. In other words, attachment relationships are essential because they facilitate the development of our brain's self-regulatory mechanism. What is a regulatory mechanism? It means that if I feel something awkward I don't understand, I go to a person and find out, hey, what's happening to me? That's a healthy emotional regulation mechanism. My brain says, go find help. And that has to be dysregulated for me to not reach out. So how do we turn that on? Those implicit behaviors, Shore talks about, and I've added to a little bit, eye contact, smile, touch, tone, movement, and sugar. You guys are like, he keeps going back to the sugar and food stuff. What is this guy's problem, right? This is very real. Let me run through these. And I'm going to add this. I want you to know Alan Shore talks about these things. Bruce Perry out of Texas and the Child Trauma Institute talks about these as bonding principles. I want to add a scriptural element to them because I think God is doing the same thing. He's trying to connect to us. So eye contact, that's that thing we do with our babies. You know, when we get them, we gaze into their eyes and they look back and we're just elated. We're like, oh, look, it's a smile, right? We get that eye contact and it's so beautiful to us. And our whole life after that, this is how we reciprocate. You look at me, I look at you. It's critical to turning attachment on in the brain. The Lord knows this, Moses 1:2, and he saw God face to face and he talked with him. And the glory of God was upon Moses. Therefore, Moses could endure his presence. Saw, face to face. You think he was bonding with Moses? I think so. Smile. Even the picture, right? It does it to us. I have my first grandchild a month ago. And that's not her. But when I see that picture, I'm like, oh, I just can see her. I'm holding her, you know. And, oh, I just want to bite her cheeks. Right? 3 Nephi 19:20. And when Jesus had spoken these words, he came again unto his disciples, and behold, they did pray steadfastly without ceasing unto him. And he did smile upon them again. And behold, they were white, even as Jesus had to smile to be white. Critical, he's bonding with us. Touch. This is my 18-year-old daughter and my father years ago. And she says to me, I remember that day. I remember the pathway, and I remember Grandpa. Why? Because he was holding her hand, right? Mark 10:13, and they brought young children to him that he should touch them, and his disciples rebuked those that brought them. 3 Nephi 18:36, and it came to pass that when Jesus had made an end of his sayings, he touched with his hand the disciples whom he had chosen, one by one, even until he had touched them all. And he spake unto them, he touched them. Now look, we know what he's doing there. He's ordaining them, correct? But the scripture focuses on touch. He didn't talk about priesthood. He's talking about God is bonding with us the way we have to bond with our kids. Think about it today. We go and we get ordained to something, get a blessing. God is bonding with us through the ordinances of the gospel. Movement. It's the reciprocal movement we do together. Noah was a just man and perfect as the generations, and Noah walked with God. Movement. And he saw the Lord, and he walked with him, and was before his face continually. And he walked with God. Movement. What does that look like with our kids? What do we have to do with them? Right, good. We're going to talk about that in a second. Tone. The soft tones that we give. How sweet are thy words unto my taste, yea, sweeter than the honey to my mouth. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. These implicit behavioral principles, implicit meaning we don't think about them. It just happens. When we feel connected, we start looking at people and talking to them and smiling. It just comes out of us. Imagine if we do that with our kids. They're going to be bonded. And sugar, they get mother's milk early. And that sugar rush happens in the context of deep human connection, physical touch. And the brain associates it forever. That's why when we have big family get-togethers, what do? We eat, right? We go on a date night. What do we do at the end of the date night? Ice cream, right? Even the Lord. It came to pass that I did go forth and partake of the fruit thereof, and I beheld that it was the most sweet above all that I have ever before tasted. Yea, and I beheld that the fruit thereof was white, to exceed all whiteness that I had ever seen. It was sweet. We have to bond with our kids, and we're teaching parents how to take the time to do these implicit things. If they have one of the kids that they're thinking, I'm just not as bonded with that kid, I'm closer to the other ones, he really irritates me. Mom, what are you going to do? Dad, what are you going to do? We're going to talk about how do we plan these moments of eye contact, smile, touch, tone, movement, sugar. What are we going to do? I tell Mom, buy some M&Ms. Throw them in their mouth. Say, hey, come here, catch this, and do this. You're replaying something you did with them when they were a baby, right? Rebond, reconnect. Now, the other, to build that strengthening relationship, these are the explicit emotional bonding principles. And I love Daniel Hughes' work. If you're not familiar with Daniel Hughes, he works specifically with unbonded kids, and I have adopted this belief that these kids that grow up on cell phones, and they're all unbonded now. I'm exaggerating to make the point, but he has 4 principles called the place principles. These are his books, Brain-Based Parenting and Attachment-Focused Parenting. He's brilliant. I love his stuff. But here are his principles, the place principles. Playfulness, love as in expressions of, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy. And he goes through these very explicitly and talks about how necessary they are. So when I'm trying to do relationship repair, we're talking about these principles. What are you going to do to repair that relationship? Well, playfulness versus what? Versus harshness, versus contempt, love versus contempt, acceptance versus evaluation and judgment, right? Curiosity versus disinterest, empathy versus apathy. See how much time I'm taking to talk about this? It is so critical when you work with adolescents with addiction. Don't assume you are the one that's going to be this for them. Your job is to get their family system running in a way where they can go to mom and dad for it. It's doable. Certainly there are extreme cases where the parents can't do it or the parents aren't available. We've got to take the time to do this. And we have to see the difficulty in their progress and how it connects to what's happening in the relationships. Now, number 2, I'm going to start going faster because I think I'm getting behind. Aggressively protect your home from inappropriate media. Elder Packer again. The priesthood holds consummate power. It can protect you from the plague of pornography, and it is a plague if you are succumbing to its influence. If one is obedient, the priesthood can show how to break a habit and even erase an addiction. Holders of the priesthood have the authority and should employ it to combat evil influences. Before he talks about people with the problem, what's his first principle? Power of the priesthood can protect. So who is he talking to? Fathers and mothers. That's absolutely who he was talking to. You can save your child's life if you will protect. And it is your priesthood and your gospel responsibility to do so. I'm going to do a very quick review of what we do with parents in more detail to help them get a grasp on what this looks like. The point parents have to understand is you have to filter at multiple levels. In the old days, you buy a filter, put it on your computer. A, that's probably not sufficient by itself. And B, there's so many other layers. So you can filter before it gets to your house. There's There's these companies that run what they call DNS servers. Some of them, like OpenDNS, will give it to you for free. And if you go register with them, all your internet comes through them from then on. And they provide that to big, huge companies and governments, and they give it to people like us for free. It's the least effective because it only grabs stuff that's labeled porn. Okay? But you got to do something at the front end. Some internet providers will have filtering worked in at the front end. Then, when it's in your house, everybody today has a router. So there's specialty routers. One called Clean Router, there's one coming out in November called Pure. Let me tell you why filtering at the router level is so great. You can set a router to create what's called a whitelist, blacklist. And if you can do this, now, Clean Router won't do this exclusively, Pure will when it comes out. If you can do this exclusively, it means you can add the websites that you want, but it will never, ever go to another website. It won't. So if you can get that functionality, and I want you to know an iPhone can do that, you can build your internet. Just add websites as you need them for your kids or for yourself. You're not using the world's internet anymore. You have a wall. It's only the ones you allow. That is awesome. It's great. And on top of it, they will provide extensive reporting on what activity's been going on there. Not to mention computers themselves, software on those computers, like NetNanny, K9, others, things like that. Not to also mention what actual sign-in on the computer. You can limit it at that level, right, on the computer's own functioning. So you have to filter at multiple levels. Filter before it gets to your house. Filter at your router. Why is the router another important reason? Because now you have all of these tablets in the house. The kids' friends come over. They're like, can I have the Wi-Fi code? Yeah, because that's our culture now, right? Sure, we provide Wi-Fi. Every hospital, hotel, every common area has Wi-Fi. In our house, that's too. My friends come over, they're like, hey, what's your code? Give them the code. So doing it at the router level is critical. So we have to go through that with parents. Now, don't forget cell phones. This is a kid who's struggling. Just last week, maybe I have time for a story. Just last week, I worked with this boy for a year and a half, worked with the parents, they're protecting him, he's doing awesome. They come in like, well, we had a big slip, big relapse, blah, blah, blah. We talked about it, and I'm like, well, gee, what happened? And the kid's looking at me, and the parents are like this. I'm like, oh, what'd you do? You got him a smartphone. They're like, yes, we did. I'm like, what are you thinking? What smartphone did you get the iPhone? No, we didn't get the iPhone. And it's just my experience. I haven't found a good app to filter an Android, and I test them. I try to test them, and I talk to people who do it. But an Apple can do it. You just got to know how. The learning curve. You can absolutely do it. But they got him a cell phone. They didn't even put any filters on it. And they just think, well, he's doing so good, right? But it's strong and constant, the urge in the boy and the girl, strong and constant. And the porn is made by who and how is it made? It's made for us to not be able to, there's no off mechanism for that. It's too exaggerated, it's too intense. We should never expect our kid to just have willpower. His willpower has to get him to come talk to you about it. But if he has access, do we want that? Sure. Parents get mad at me when I say that. Willpower does not work. It is not the method we're going to use. What you'll find is willpower opens up in other areas, help you connect. Now, look, cell phone, Elder Bednar quoted David O. McKay. When we think about cell phones, look at this quote. He prophesied this discoveries that would stagger the imagination, would make possible the preaching of the gospel to every kindred tongue and people. And further, discoveries latent with such power, either for the blessing or the destruction of human beings, as to make man's responsibility in controlling them the most gigantic ever placed in human hands. No metaphor, right? In human hands, to great power or great destruction. This age is fraught with limitless perils as well as untold possibilities. He said that in 1966. It's amazing. I feel so lucky to be a member of the church. The prophets that can tell us what's coming like this, if we have ears to hear. I don't know that any of us would have understood that in 1966. We certainly do now, right? So here's the continuation of that tsunami, right? This is iPhone sales. I'm not going to go through the dates, but they started in about 04, 05. Look, 60 million in 08 and 09. And iPod sales, the iTouch, this was the big one. It seems like not a phone at the time, but a little iPod, but it had full internet, full access. Bought it for kids. Like the Christmas of, what's that year? 08. In my clinical experience, every Mormon parent bought their kid for Christmas an iTouch. And then 5 years later, they're porn addicts and in my office. Of course, I'm exaggerating, right? I'm going to go a little faster. Third principle, teach them early and consistent progressive developmental facts. Why do we have to do that? Because our brain is designed, this is Bruce Berry out of Texas, the Child Trauma Institute. Our brain is designed to promote relationships. Specific parts of the human brain respond to emotional cues, such as facial expression, touch, scent, and more important, allow us to get pleasure from positive human interactions. The systems in the brain that mediate pleasure appear to be closely connected to the systems that mediate emotional relationships. This is not new to us, right? Spencer Kimball, there's nothing unholy or degrading about sexuality in itself, for by that means men and women join in a process of creation and in an expression of love. Not only are we designed that way, but we're designed that way with purpose, with spiritual purpose. It guides us through the plan of salvation. I don't know of another religion where sexuality is a critical part of the plan of salvation. Maybe, but none more than us. We have to see it as a positive and good thing. Let's talk about negative urges. I'm going to go quicker. I keep saying that to get myself to remember to do that. So urges, we get them, right? They're critical. Where do they come from? What do we tend to tell our kids to do? Our knee-jerk reaction, right, is urge negative. Push that away. Just push that urge away. That's a bad urge. We want to deal with that when you're married. Push it away now, just when you're married. Put it in your pocket. Don't get it out till you're married. You get driving home from your wedding with your bride, you're like, oh, look what I got in my pocket. Urges. I've been holding them, waiting for you. Now, it doesn't work that way, right? So where do urges come from? They fundamentally come from our needs. Our body has needs, and the urge system is there to take care of the needs. It is self-care. We have to learn to listen to our body. What is it telling us? Now, if we pair shame with an urge, and that shame restricts that urge, what will happen? Need goes unmet. Do we still have the need? So what happens to the urge? Bigger urge, right? You like the flames? That's pretty hot, right? Get it? Hot? Okay. Try. So let me do my favorite example. Hunger. What's the body need when we get the hunger urge? What's it needing? Food. What's it going to turn the food into? Energy. Exactly right. So when my body needs energy, what does it give me? Hunger urge. I don't have a gauge that I have to check all the time. It just does it. My body is taking care of me. It tells me when I'm hungry. Again, if I pair that with shame or somebody tells me eating is bad, what happens to that urge? More hunger comes back. What is this in America when we pair shame and hunger? What happens? Eating disorders, right? Same structure. So what is the urge? What is the need the body has when it gives us a sexual urge? I want you to know this is my favorite question of the whole presentation. And I'm going to be disappointed because a bunch of therapists, they know how to answer it. What's the need? What's the body need? Right. It needs attachment. It needs love and bonding. Emphatically so. I can't tell you how many people, even adults, can't answer this question. My favorite answer, I did this in a steak one time, and the bishop that invited me is right there. And he says, well, it's to have babies. And I said, now, bishop, this means every time you have sex. I said that from the pulpit. Every time you have sex, you're thinking, I can't wait to have babies. He's like, oh, no, I guess that's not what I'm thinking. That's right. You're not. Because what we really want is love and bonding. Now, addicts will tell me, I don't think so. I think I want sex. The guys will tell me that. I say, well, I can prove it to you right now. And they're like, okay, what are you going to do? I say, just answer this question. Let's say you tell your wife, look, I really want sex. Because maybe I'm an addict, whatever, but I really want sex. And she says, fine, I'm sick of it. I will give you sex whenever you want. Just get off of me as soon as you're done, because I hate it. What does he say? I ask him, how often will you do that? What do they tell me? Never. I won't do that. Why? You got sex. I thought that was what you wanted. No, I guess I want something else. I don't know exactly. You want love and connectedness. You want bondedness. That is what you're really looking for. Now, this is critical in helping parents teach sex. It means that when we're lonely, sexual urges signal the need for connection. This is fundamentally the basis of a sex-positive perspective. That imagine being a 17-year-old boy or girl and you feel sexual and you're able to think, man, I'm really feeling sexual. I must really need to connect with people. That's what we teach them. That's the regulating principle. Remember Alan Shore? Complex organisms regulate emotion through what? Relationship. Right? And sex is there to push us to relationship. Now, we live in this pornified world where that's got completely hijacked, right? But that's its goal. That's where we're going. So, this is a quote from a parent's guide. I love when people say, well, I wish there was a handbook on parenting. Wouldn't it be nice? They make that joke, Like, we're just doing this on the fly. Well, guess what? If you're Mormon, there's one. And it's a good one, too. It's pretty good. Here's what they say about sex. It's important that you teach your children about sexuality. The Lord has given the responsibility of teaching of children to parents in this one area where children need accurate and morally correct information. Look at the chapter. It's chapter 4. Look at the age. 4 to 11. Start early. Now, so in the context of having your mind in this positive sexual place, then we teach them early and consistently progressive developmental facts. And I'm going to run through these really fast. Like at 5, we might do themes of good touch, bad touch, right? This is never a replacement for protection. We have to protect our kids. At 8, we do just the facts, right? We tell them where babies come from. It's like mechanics. Like if a kid grows up on the farm, he knows because they have all these animals, he sees it. We want to make sure our kids at 8 or around that age know, okay? And the other thing we're doing there is we're setting up us as the source. At 8, they're going to be like, huh? And ooh, and that's what you want. Because they're going to walk away scratching their head, but they're going to walk away knowing, I can talk about sex with mom and dad. They are where I go for answers. At 11, we're going to talk about puberty prep, maybe sooner. You have to judge with your kids. What's going to happen to my body? Don't leave them in darkness. This is the most anxious time for a kid, is puberty, right? 13-year-old, this is the age. When we know they're going to start having those feelings, this is where we're going to see this idea. Sexual feelings signal need for connection. Sexual feelings signal the need for connection.
Would it be accurate to say then that connecting with people would reduce sexual urges?
Yeah, so here, it reduces in this sense, is it reduces the compulsiveness of the urge. It doesn't eliminate the urge. Right? It does not go away, not to its elimination, but to its healthy management. I can manage it now because I'm open with somebody. I've talked about it. I tell kids, I want to hear these experiences where you go to your parents' room Sunday night and you jump on the bed and you're like, oh my gosh, everything today seems sexual. And they have this, they rub your head and say, man, we love you. We're so glad you're talking to us about it. And we talk about it. And at the beginning, you're like, that's never going to happen. I'm like, you watch, it's going to happen.
You're both parents, right?
Absolutely.
I have a lot of parents, like moms, feel like it should just be a dad.
Yeah. What are we seeding? We're seeding, don't talk to girls about sex. That kid will not talk to his wife about sex. We want them to hear both roles. They're both scared. Sure, I'm pawning it off on my spouse if I can, right? Okay, I have 10 minutes to do a lot. 16, we talk about hanging out, dating, boundaries, relationship development. Focus on development, not just themes of morality. Talk about what's happening to them. Talk regularly and positively about sexual feelings, not just what's in that list. Now, we've got to model and demonstrate strong, abiding effect. This is critical. We have to do this. Elder Ballard, be positive about how wonderful and beautiful physical intimacy can be when it happens within the bounds of the Lord has set, including typical covenants, commitments to eternal marriage. Studies show that the biggest deterrent to casual sexual activity is a wholesome attitude that connects such personal relationships with genuine commitment and mature love. Where do your kids see genuine commitment and mature love? Where? With you. They have to see it. And what does that look like? So this is my favorite story about this. My daughter had a boyfriend, and he was at my house, sitting on the couch next to me, not next to me, on a different couch, and I'm laying on a couch watching TV. My wife's right there in the kitchen. My daughter's not there. She's at work. She's coming home. This boy, I'm his bishop. He's about to leave on a mission, and they started this dating thing like right before he leaves, and I'm like, ooh, I'm watching you, you know. He's a good kid, though. And I'm just laying there. My wife says something like, I need some flour. I need some sugar. I'm out of sugar. Something like that. And she said, I need a cup of it. And I said, I need a cup of Shannon. That's my wife's name. And she trots around the island. And she jumps on top of me. And we canoodle there for a second, you know, hug and kiss and whatnot. And I peek out of the corner of my eye to look at that soon-to-be missionary. He's like this. Oh, man. You know? And I thought, you know what, Elder, that's okay with me. If you come back and marry my daughter, which he didn't, but if you did, I want to make sure you know what real love looks like. That's what our kids got to see, and they got to know it. And sometimes a single mom or somebody might feel like that's really difficult. What we model it with them. We hug and kiss on them. Even when they're going, get away, we keep doing it. We model affection with our friends. We got to model it. They've got to see it. Okay, I've got about 8 minutes left. Be prepared to respond to the first sexual experience and exposure to pornography. This is because what we're doing is we're protecting sexuality's connection to relationship versus object. So everything we've talked about, the tsunami, the novelty, and the supernormal stimulant, all of this wants to capture their sexuality and connect it to object, to a screen, to a picture, to something that is unreal. It wants it connect. Why? What is the purpose of all that being made? Money. People are making money off of the sex drive, right? That's their motive, but they want to capture it. And we know the science has told us that it can capture, right? The butterflies will go to the fake butterfly. They go there, and they can't pull away. So we're protecting sexuality's connection to relationship versus object. That is what we are doing. Digital sexuality is object-focused. It's about being alone, frenzied searching, clicking, multiple tabs, constant novelty, shock and surprise, and is self-focused. And it has tons of adrenaline in addition to the dopamine in it. Healthy sexuality is other-focused. It's about courtship. It's about touching and being touched. It develops slowly. It's about smells and pheromones, emotional connection, responding with empathy, and sharing. We have to be ready for our kids to have their first sexual experience. This is my worst slide. I like to use pictures. There's too much information here. I'm going to read through it really quick, and then we got about 5 minutes to close. We have to expect sexual feelings and behavior. This is a normal thing. Your child, we tell our parents, will likely masturbate. They will likely see porn. They're going to have a sexual experience. Most kids do. Very small percentage don't. Some don't. Quit praying for that. It's not likely, right? You have to be prepared to be emotionally regulated. You will be amazed at the things people, I'm sure you are. You hear stories about how the mom freaks out and screams and cries and it's the end of the world, or how the dad yells and spanks him with a belt, or what happens around their first initial response, even when it's something just normal. Because you see, this whole porn thing has traumatized parents. They're so terrified that their kids are going to get trapped that when the least little sign comes out, they feel devastated because they're hearing all of these stories, that we all hear constantly. We have to remain calm. And remember, the urge is strong and constant. We have to refrain from sexual feelings reframe sexual feelings as a need for connection. Yes, that's how you felt that. Yeah, of course. Because you want to be connected to her or him, right? Yeah. Well, of course. Don't mistake normative sexual development for addictive behavior. If there is pornographic contact of some kind, use questions to help them understand the dilemma they feel of intensity versus satisfaction. Affirm their experience. Wow, that must have been pretty thrilling, right? That question right there, when you say this to a kid, wow, that must be pretty, you implicitly communicate to your kid, I know it's thrilling too. Because if it must have been, I imply that I know that it is, right? Tell me how you felt afterwards and what the kid's going to say. I felt bad, I felt uncomfortable, and Good Mormons kids are going to say, they're going to equate this like the spirit left, and so I felt like crap about myself. Well, okay, that's true too, but what's also happening is you overstimulated your body. It's just like when you eat too much candy and you get sick. So yeah, you felt crappy because your body can't handle all that dopamine in your brain, just like your stomach can't handle all that Skittles and soda pop. You felt sick about it. We have to communicate understanding and acceptance for their natural curiosity. I just do this in role play. I have parents start, the kid tells them about their first experience, and I prep the parents. We're doing this role play about them practicing acceptance and understanding. If the issue does become chronic or problematic, seek help, deal with access aggressively, do the things we've talked about today, establish a daily experience of loving connection and accountability, and develop the trust and the relationship that allows for dynamic reaching out. Meaning, if they're struggling, you have to get to the point where that kid can come to you when they struggle. Parents have a hard time doing that. There's the 5 principles again. I just want you to know that it's a sacred opportunity to work with parents and to help them understand what's happening to the world's view of sexuality, what's happening to their child, and to help them come to a place where they feel competent about that. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to present. If anybody wants a PDF of my thing, feel free to email me at this address. And if you all do that, then be patient. It might take me a month or so to. Well, that's why I wasn't going to give handouts, because that's in the works. And so, but I will. I'm not that worried about it. I'll give a PDF as long as you agree not to. Everybody nod their head. Yeah, I agree. I know you could steal it. I don't really care that much, but you use it. I do want you to use it. That's the most important thing. Help parents. Teach them. Work with them. Help them feel like this is a doable thing. And I'm grateful for being here. So that's all. I think we're done. Thank you. Yeah, question. We do have 2 minutes.
Can you talk a little bit about training parents in having their children be accountable?
Yeah, well, I will establish a daily check-in, and the child's responsibility. We talk about accountability. See, shame roots out this interesting thing, especially with men, but definitely with all humans, is that shame gets in the way of this feeling we get when we feel accountable. When we're accountable, we feel strong. It's like, yeah, my bad. You see it on a basketball court. Hey, my bad, bad pass, my bad. And they're like all proud that they admitted their mistake. Well, that exists everywhere, in every part of our life. And so we've got to get that feeling, we've got to tease it out, we've got to quiet the shame a little bit. How do we quiet the shame? We get the parents a little open and accepting, and the kid's like, oh, I'm not bad. No, and then we start accountability, and so in the check-in, they do this attachment exercise I give them, and they get close, and they literally ask the question, are we close enough to talk about sex? Attachment first. We're close enough to talk about sex. And then the first thing he has to do is give accountability. He said, well, today, I did or did not look at porn and masturbate. And then they go on and talk about, well, how was your sexual energy today? And we give them this rating scale, and they're learning to talk about those sexual feelings. I can't tell you how many times when I have the parents alone, they're like, oh my gosh, man, my wife and I, we've started talking about sexual feelings. We didn't do that before. The scale's amazing, and they're just, because they had never done it, And so the training they get to try to help their kid even helps them. So accountability has to live within that attached container there with the parents. Any other questions?
I have a question. So we have, probably 10 or 12 iPods.
I thought you were going to say boys, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so worried. 10 or 12 iPods, yes.
Yeah, and computers and all this stuff. And the iPods leave the house and the phones leave the house, and I feel like just so overwhelmed as a parent to try to keep track of what's going on all of those everywhere.
Yeah.
So I know that you said the iPods, there's an app.
No, it's not an app. It's just built into the general. If you go to the general settings and then restrictions, you turn on restrictions, and then just go through each one, see what it does. Go back and see what it's doing to the function. You can turn the browser off so there's no browser. You can limit the browser. It is really good.
Can they change it?
No, because there's a password on the restrictions, and that can be the parent.
Do you feel like maybe we just need to get the browser off there altogether? Because I've done that.
Yeah. And as the kid gets older, if he actually has a need, then you can turn the browser on and you can set it to have that one website he needs for his class that he's in, the algebra class where the teacher posts something all the time, that one website. And it's the one, it will never go to another website. If you whitelist it and you shut all the others down, it'll work. But when you have that many devices, the router is critical. Buy a router that will do that. Clean router or pure. Question in the back.
Well, I was going to say, you mentioned you only found the iPods, but the Androids, the Samsungs have the same features.
They have the same features. So here's been my experience with Android is they're designed to be more open and customizable. And there's a couple of features that let you backdoor to turn an app off. And most people don't know about it, but it's easy to find online how to do it. And it's built into the system. So I've tried several apps. I used to be an Android guy, and I have guys that I work with that are adult addicts, and they're like, well, I'm telling them, I want you to tell me what works, what you're finding, and I continually get disappointed in that area. I would love to have a good resource that will absolutely filter Android. That would be great. So if you hear of one, please let me know. Absolutely. Any other questions? Yeah.
I just heard a fun joke the other day about, the exposure our youth have in this day compared to ours. With the dad who came up to his son and said, son, it's time to have a talk about the birds and the bees. And his son said, sure, Dad, what would you like to know?
Right. That's right. It feels that way, right? Absolutely. Thank you. It's a pleasure.